and really excited. I think Elite 8 should go for a Lance ban if they don't want to pick it. If they do want to pick Lance, then something like a Catherine, Grace or Glaive could work well.
I personally think Grace, or rather Glaive, would be a very good ban at this point in time because, I mean, mages are very relevant in the current meta, and Glaive is one of those heroes that can counter mages relatively well. So Glaive being taken away in the early game, early part of the ban phase would be very good. However, Elite 8 on the blue side will be removing Lyra, one of the very good healers as well, although not very prioritized in 2.8.
Yeah, Lyra was picked quite a lot in the first game, the first series of today. Impunity did seem to favour it, and we're seeing so much less Scarf emphasis. This is really interesting. I didn't expect the mages to be as important as they are. And of course, Lance, first pick from Elite 8, that's smart. Pick it up for themselves or deny it away. I think Catherine's still a fine pick, or Grace. It doesn't make much difference. It's more depending on what your captain is comfortable on and what composition you want to run. If you want to run a CC chain comp, they both can work. Catherine's probably better. But if you want someone like a healer, then obviously you're going to want to pick Grace up now. I think Black Feather could be an alright pick if they don't want to go for Scarf, because obviously second pick Scarf would be really strong with a healer with Celeste removed. And they're going to go first pick Idris. We see Idris get through draft without being banned or picked, and now Bren really want to first pick it. Again, why have there's been two weapon power Idrises? I really want to see a CP Idris today because I think it's such a strong hero.
I mean, I'm with you on that. You know, we've seen two weapon Idris coming out, although the casters at desk have been talking and have been giving CP Idris a lot of talk and a lot of attention at this point in time. So I'm hopeful, hopefully we'll be able to see a CP Idris. But with that, a CP Idris being picked, if it is a CP Idris, then Glaive would be one of those priority bans. If not, then at least the mage to just remove the mage that would come out. If not, then Castro. Castro will be a very good ban at this point in time. Like you said earlier on, Castro is a very good counter into that of CP Idris in that early game if Castro is placed in lane. So with that, I mean, for the side of Elite 8, they have got all the comfortable picks, and based on previous season itself, we saw a lot of Batiste being picked up for the side of Elite 8. Firstly on that, and Glaive as well. They have got a lot of priority pickups, especially those heroes that can snowball in that early game, like that of Koshka. We've seen a lot of that from them. On top of that, Cruel as well. However, Cruel has been changed a little in this current patch so that DMR do not provide him as much health barrier as he had in 2.7. So what do you personally think? I mean, we are at a standstill at draft at this point in time.
I think Catherine's going to be picked up now is most likely. Just get the captain, and then in return, Elite 8 Scarf. And that becomes into a skill matchup. If you're CP Idris against Scarf, it's whoever can land more skill shots. And I did not expect an Arden. That's a very interesting pick, with Catherine obviously still available, Finn available. Lyra and Grace have both been taken off the fold, as well as Lance. But maybe the Arden pick does signify that it might be a weapon Idris with a Scarf jungle if that's allowed, because Arden Scarf is a fantastic combo together. And so if Elite 8 decide not to pick it, I'm pretty certain that Nebulae will, that Bren Esports will decide to change their comp from maybe a CP Idris to weapon and then push that into the jungle. But I really hope Elite 8 decide to pick Scarf themselves. It's a good pick, and obviously with the mages, with the Celeste already gone, yeah, it makes a lot of sense for them. And now lane, they've got Glaive, they've got Kestrel, which they could go for. It's really a comfort pick, and Vox could work. I don't think it's great against CP Idris. I'd much prefer to see a Kestrel personally.
Well, yeah, Kestrel will be the more intelligent pickup at this point in time. If not, then Glaive. We've seen a lot of Glaive and Scarf. There you go. We do see a Glaive being picked up by the side of Elite 8. Glaive at this point in time is in a very comfortable point in the current meta. Firstly, the Afterburn, and of course with that Tension Bow and Sorrow Blade, build that is coming up on Glaive, he just put up so much burst in a very short period of time. However, we do see a rather peculiar pickup coming up from the side of Bren Esports, and that would be a CP Fortress, I hope.
Yeah, most likely to be a CP Fortress and a Weapon Idris lane. I mean, it's possible we're going to see Weapon Fortress. It has had a little bit of an emergence with the Tension Bow build. and just so that to try and help CP Idris survive. I don't think it's the smartest idea to go Weapon Fortress. I think it's much better to just go CP Fortress and then decide if you want to either go double CP with Idris or Weapon to try and execute that Scarf. And now the problem with you, Idris, in lane is that Glaive is a good counter to Idris if he can bully early game. Fortress has a really slow jungle clear speed early game, and so Scarf is obviously very quick. And now this means Glaive is going to be able to rotate up to lane with Scarf before Fortress can, and Idris is probably going to be in a lot of trouble. So I favour Elite 8's comp here because Idris is just going to be almost unable to farm, and then Scarf and Glaive are just going to start snowballing him.
Well, yeah, that is one thing as well. But the Fortress being picked up, going up against a Lance is kind of iffy if you were to ask me, because Gideon Wall is always a threat for Fortress, who you want to use your A to jump in, but if Gideon Wall is up for Lance, then he can just push you backwards. And like I said earlier on, for Impunity, it will apply the same for Elite 8. You have a very thick wall in terms of that Lance to get through as an Idris. So you can, granted, you can Shimmer Strike, you can Shroud Step into the backlines, try to remove that Scarf as soon as possible, but on your back thought, there is always a Glaive that will want to go into your backlines to instantly delete you with Twisted Stroke or Blood Song. So that is one thing that the side of Bren Esports have to consider coming into this game.
Yeah, definitely. I think the Lance is going to be extremely good at stopping Idris diving in, and as you said, stopping Fortress with that Truth of the Tooth. It's definitely going to be possible for Bren to be able to take this game, but I think they're going to have to use the attack of the pack and just dive in on Scarf, block the CC from Lance and Glaive. Once they've got that one kill, then they can start snowballing and be in 3v2 situation and be able to get Glaive. So it's going to be interesting to see also if Idris is able to farm up. Because if Idris is able to farm up, even if it's a weapon or if it's Crystal, then it's going to be hard to try and play against that for Elite 8.
Definitely. So thank you for that analysis, Minimizer. So casting this match with me, I have the wonderful I Request a Duel.
Hey, thank you for the introduction, Luxura, and thanks for early draft analysis, Mini. So we are here in the first match between Elite 8 and Bren Esports, and yeah, looking at those team comps there, is more than likely going to be that weapon power Idris. I know it's a bit of speculation between the casters of we want to see a CP Idris, it's just in what situations can it work out, and as Mini might have said, you know, it just wouldn't be the best decision to go a CP in this case, where weapon would work out so much better, because it's really once he gets to level 6 and is able to get the Shimmer Strike, can get onto the backline quite easily, and more than likely they're going to be looking for the pick up onto the Scarf early on if possible. But we're going to have to see how these team fights play out, as Guessing is going to go and jump in there, takes a bit of damage in return. They weren't able to get the mid camp, as is an early rotation coming up from the side of Elite 8 into that middle to pick it up and secure it early, and actually a full recall back from the side of Bren Esports.
Well, there is one thing as well that I wanted to mention earlier on, is that I guess a CP Idris would not work as well coming into the comp like that of E8. But honestly, if you think about it, your Charcum does a lot of damage. You can kind of try to reposition yourself in terms of those Shroud Stabs and try to land your Charcum. And the high burst that CP Idris brings to the table, and of course with that range, means that you can out-kite a Glaive as long as you can block out the Afterburn and try to just stay behind that of Guessing Axe on that of Arden, so you can just do your range attack. And on top of that as well, you have Sync 1 on that Fortress that can soak up a little damage as long as he has got ultimate ready and he has got a fortified health when he calls his wolves out. So that is one thing to note, but however, I think being Southeast Asia, the weapon build path of Idris will just be a little more prevalent.
We just have to see what's in C1 builds here. Because right now, it's going to be the CP Idris. I was looking at the builds, and I'm like, okay, neither of them have gone for that CP yet, and maybe C1 just wants to clear farm a bit faster with his autos early in the match, but we're going to see Mr. Jim picking up that heavy prism to start with. Obviously the Book of Eulogies being there at the start to help well in lane, and we're going to have to see how the CP works out, because I do agree with you there, as long as Mr. Jim is able to position themselves well enough. And when it's going up against Scarf, it's actually not that bad being CP either, because Scarf is a mage hero, meaning they're going to have to stand still when they use that Spitfire, and if you're able to dodge it out, or just be in a good position in the first place and then land that Chakram on them while they're doing so, CP Idris has so much damage potential there with the CP Chakrams coming through. And right now I'm just wondering, it really depends which team is going to be the aggressors in this situation, because right now if Elite 8 choose to be the aggressors and Hun Jaegers is able to sit comfortably in the backline without being challenged, I could see the game going over to the side of Elite 8, especially falling into the late game when we see this Scarf ramp up so much. However, I'm excited to see what Mr. Jim on this CP Idris can bring to the table, and we're going to have to see how it flows with the rest of the team comp, of course, with that Arden and the Fortress, who is now going to be a weapon power for.
Yeah, and on top of that as well, there is one thing I want to mention, and that is Minimize's response when he found out that it will be a CP Idris, and in his words, it reads, yes! Okay. Sorry,
that's like a diversity, and it's just... I'm sorry about that, chat. You had to deal with that, but that's just some bad voice acting. Good thing that Luxura is not a voice actor. Instead, he is an amazing analyst here alongside me, and right now we see Guessing going in, actually taking a fair bit of damage, and there's no kill going to be secured. First blood not going to be handed over just yet, and it looks like Guessing going to be able to heal up from that one. Did use the fountain on themselves though, so that could be important into the next team fight. Might give Elite 8 the advantage as they're still holding on to theirs.
Yep, there is one thing we must note as well. It's that Bren Esports, they are very accustomed to playing very, very aggressively. But when it comes to going up against 8, especially with that Lance being able to hold lane so independently, and of course not forgetting the poke coming from Han Jaeger as well, and also the rev up time for both Sync1 on that Fortress and Mr. Jim on that CP Idris, they are playing a tad more passively, to be honest, because I've played with Guessing before, and he has a play style that is very unique to himself, and it's that he enjoys putting himself out there and just soak up a lot of damage very unnecessarily, but he makes plays for his team, but another team fight will break up.
Mr. Jim with the dodge away from that Impale, however, no fault from Elite 8 as they were only able to, I guess, lock down Guessing. And as you were saying, Guessing likes to be that aggressive roamer, which we'll see here as they jump right into the middle of the fight. There's going to be a Impale. It does land with the root onto Mr. Jim, even though they were able to Shroud Step out of that one. And really, neither team able to find the solid engage. Of course, you would expect Elite 8 with an Impale and an Afterburn. They should be able to find something here. They even have the slow on the Goop if they're able to land that. But right now, both teams playing it fairly passive. Bren Esports, however, going to use that minion candy, try to put a bit of aggression onto that first turret. And yeah, it's fairly, I guess, even at the moment. Quite a passive early game.
It's definitely a passive early game, but there is one thing that we must note, and I would like to bring point to the viewers. It's the rotations coming up from Elite 8. They are doing the double carry rotation back into the jungle and just leaving Anime Save Me to hold lane. Like I said earlier on, and I pointed out earlier on, it's that a Lance can generally hold lane very, very independently, do not quite need any support from his allies because of the Gideon wall and the damage reduction in case the enemies do decide to push forward. And with that, you do see Official Hind at level 7. Oh, then
there's going to be the Afterburn going in, and Pale doesn't land, however, fair bit of damage from that first turret, and there's going to be Attack of the Pack is popped by C1, and they're just able to push the enemy team off once again. So it's more of this push and pull effect and no one really able to confirm anything at this point. I think there's a very good effort from Elite 8. They just weren't able to land all the CC they needed to. If the Impale had landed and the Afterburn, maybe they could have got the kill onto Mr. Jim early on. Because right now what's keeping Mr. Jim alive a lot of the time is guessing on this Arden, going in there with the Vanguard to keep him safe and get him out of there with the speed boost, as well as the initial kit of Idris having the Shroud Step to just get away slightly. Of course, you're not going to have the blink that Weapon Power has, but it's still enough in some situations. Oh, there's going to be Impale going in once again, and you see Vanguard instantly onto Mr. Jim. They want to keep them alive indeed. Right now, it's more C1 as you see the tension bow built up on them is going to be in there just for jumping in and adding that little bit more damage. And I think a lot of Bren Esports comp is going to rely on how well Mr. Jim can go into the late game and diving onto that backline and getting those kills. But right now, Bren Esports is kind of having to just respond to the engage coming out from Elite 8 every now and then, as we see another Impale Vanguard onto them. Afterburn was followed through, but there's going to be the Gauntlet keeping them Elite 8 in a 2v3 situation, and there's going to be the Shroud Shimmer Strike in there by Mr. Jim. Kill going over to Guessing, but first blood overall to the side of Bren Esports, and as I said, they were just waiting for the right moment.
Yep, and there you go. The fight has not ended yet.
It has not, as Anime Save Me going very... There's going to be the engage coming out from the side, or the re-engage, I should say, coming out from the side of Bren Esports, and Mr. Jim so low under that turret, able to make it out alive, and they're able to pick up a kill onto Hun Jaegers as well, and they're now going to push onto this first turret. So getting first blood, followed up with the second kill, and the first turret of the game. Bren Esports doing a great job to start, I guess, putting a bit of momentum into this match.
Yep, and this is one thing that I want to point out is that Elite 8, with their rotation at every single point in time, they would usually be a level up on Bren Esports, but they are not fully utilizing the level advantage that they have. And on top of that as well, like you mentioned earlier on, it's that they have very good gang potential, and they just use that gang potential that they have in that early game trying to bully Mr. Jim out of the lane, that Elite 8 would definitely have the upper hand. However, they are not doing so. They are playing very, very passively, although their team comp wants them to be just super aggressive, going in for gangs after gangs and just capitalizing on the fact that they have an advantage in terms of, say, you know, the numbers advantage, but they are not doing so. However, the turret of Bren Esports is getting very, very low.
Yes, and you can see just the damage now. Jaeger's able to put down that range damage with the Spitfires, really put a bit of siege potential on there. And Bren Esports needs to be careful because they cannot let themselves get out of position, because they will get punished for it with the Impale and the Afterburn that is on the side of Elite 8. So you can see that the lane constantly being pushed up, even with minion candies, which is quite surprising. We saw it being used previously on the side of Bren Esports. They were putting some candies onto the minions earlier to try push. And right now, that's going to be the response coming out from the side of Elite 8, at least for that initial try. I think maybe now having to step off that, going for a bit more vision, as you see Anime Save Me picking up some scout traps as well as flares. And I think, you know, it's quite important that they have this map advantage, because we saw in a previous map vision, I should say, we saw in a previous game where there was a glaive that was just able to roam freely, and it just destroyed the enemy team. I think it was in our previous game with J3X versus Nebulae, and J3X had a glaive on that team, and they were just wreaking havoc because the glaive was able to get into the back lines just so suddenly with that Afterburn. But right now, I think Bren Esports doing a decent job to keep the jungle fairly balanced with vision. And right now we see the engage coming through by Elite 8. They're going to be able to find the turret. Guessing going low, but it's not quite the target you want. There's going to be attack of the pack and Gauntlet to follow through. However, it's going to get blocked out by Elite 8, and they're going to be able to walk free from that fight. They were able to get a turret, so I think for the side of Elite 8, that's definitely a positive engagement. They didn't get any kills, but I don't think that's what they were looking for in that situation.
Yep, and one more thing that I have to note and point out is also the fact that, you know, the passive game, if Bren Esports is going to continue on this very passive gameplay and not just fully utilizing the advantage, every tiny advantage that they get from every little team fight, then definitely Elite 8 will come out on top, because they are very patient players, firstly, and on top of that as well, the poke coming up from Scarf is just much more consistent as compared to Mr. Jim on that CP Idris, because it's just down to, you know, your cooldown on the Chakram versus the cooldown on Spitfire and Goop. So if they are going to play the passive game, then definitely Elite 8 will come out on top. And that is quite an issue at this point in time, because if they do it like we saw earlier on, allowing Elite 8 to just be on play the passive game and just dance around on the lane, in lane with Elite 8, just spells trouble and doom for your team, because they have a glaive that's very patient. Official Hein is known for a very patient player, able to withhold that afterburn to very crucial moments. And on top of that, you have Han Jaeger just, you know, breathing fire and throwing out Spitfires here and there, dropping goops as well and igniting them, just zoning out your entire team. So that is one thing that Bren Esports have to take note when going into team fights, because Mr. Jim just do not have the clear speed of Han Jaeger on that Scarf, firstly, and do not have the burst that Glaive and Scarf has.
Yeah, and right now we see that they are walking right into the Spitfire of Han Jaegers, where the whole team of Bren Esports needs to be careful indeed, as you mentioned before, and there's just so much zoning coming out from that Scarf right now. And you're right, that is definitely where Bren Esports could fall off, and they need to be so cautious about, they face check for Brush since Scene 1, taking a fair bit of damage, but Anime Save Me very low. They might want to back off from that fight, at least let Anime Save Me go back to base and heal up, which looks like that is going to be the case for them. And Bren Esports, I think taking notice of that, is going to go for this gold miner, which I believe is currently full. However, Official Hein and Han Jaeger's weighing in the wings, and Official Hein going to be able to steal that one, guessing going in with the gauntlet, but looks like Official Hein going to jump right out of it, and Bren Esports actually being on the back foot of this fight. As you can see, Mr. Jim on the back line already very low. There's going to be the Echo was used earlier, guessing able to use the gauntlet once more just for safety. And that is back out there. So you were just saying before that, you know, even though Bren have the kills and what looks like the early advantage, they got the first turret, we now see it's starting to sway into more even grounds, if not what will eventually turn into the side of Elite 8 taking the win. Because if they let Elite 8 continue to play this passive game, they're just going to get ramped up, and that Scarf is going to become such a threat.
Yeah, and there is one thing as well, it's that this player style is very unlike that of Elite 8. The Elite 8 that we've come to know and love would be the aggressors half the time. They don't play passively, they just jump in, they put out as much damage as possible, and on top of that as well, they can easily just take down Bren Esports had they just tried to commit. You know, they can...
Those are fighting words there.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, let's all be honest, yeah? And guessing, right, burn the Echo, burn the Gauntlet twice, which means they do not have a soft CC for the side of Bren Esports, and yet Elite 8 is not really committing and taking advantage, capitalizing on the burnt ultimates, like that of Gauntlet, one of the very big ultimates coming into this game. So that is one thing that, you know, Elite 8 maybe have to work on coming to this game. They obviously have got the upper hand at this point in time. They have got better siege, better, you know, displacement properties and singling out properties. And yet, none of them, or none of those properties are put to full use, good use at all.
Yep, and we see it's already 6:30 in, only 2 kills. Slow and more so passive game. And right now, whichever team really wins a team fight is going to sway this one. We're even in objectives, almost even in kills, but we're talking about Elite 8 maybe just holding back a bit. You think that Elite 8 have a clear advantage if they decide to go in for a fight, and that they should just have a bit more confidence in their team comp and where they are at already in this match. I mean, if we look at the farm, 196 on Han Jaegers and Mr. Jim, 210. Both of these laners have been hyper-fed and should be looking for a fight. And when it comes to if they're able to be the engagers, which we'll see here, there's the gauntlet going down, and they're going to chase Elite 8 through that corridor into the enemy jungle, and they're pushing through, but they walked right into the goop, into the Spitfire. They get taken down. Glaive, meanwhile, is actually who they should be looking at, because we didn't really focus on how much damage this Glaive is also putting up, because right now Mr. Jim is such a glass cannon build there. It's how you have to build CP Idris, but I think it's not going to be effective enough if you're not able to get in there and lock down anyone. And it's what you talked about earlier about soft CS, not soft CS, soft CC with the gauntlet. Obviously being hard CC if you're able to land that stun, but I think in most situations you saw them push Elite 8 back into a situation where they might have been able to win it out, but they just forgot about having to worry about the Scarf and the Goop, and it just went all in Elite 8's favor, and they've just been waiting out for this moment.
Yep, and this is what I'm talking about. E8, Elite 8 definitely would have what it takes to win a lot of team fights based on the amount of damage they can output. And I mean, granted, Bren Esports, we do not discount the damage that they have. They have got a CP Idris, but, you know, they have better fight potential. They can jump in your face, go up into your face, try to take a Handjäger as soon as possible in the early part of the game. But allowing the entirety of Elite 8 to just rev up into that late game, there is no way Bren Esports can possibly come through. You are running a weapon fortress after all, but I'll talk more as Elite 8 is just trying to push into the crystal turret.
And there's going to be a defensive gauntlet used. It isn't going to be enough. Anime saved me from getting out at the Crucible to escape that one, and it looks like the Kraken, first turret is actually going to go down, and so is Idris, and now we see Scarf just pushing in for the double kill. They're going to push in for the win. It's only guessing up. He won't be able to save the turret, and he won't be able to take anyone down with him, just fighting to his last breath, giving it his all, but that's going to be that ace going up to the side of Elite 8, and a very patient, well thought out game from Elite 8. They managed to come through with the win at 19 minutes, 33 in, and GG, well played.
Definitely. So, you know, just looking at the game itself, it is rather harsh for the side of Bren Esports. But to talk more about this game, let's invite back Mini Mitre to break it down for us.
Thank you for that, and I really wanted to see Idris come through. Extremely excited when they decided, but in the end, I think the main problem was, as you said, Weapon Fortress didn't really do very much, and they didn't team fight together. They just let Scarf ramp up to the late game, and Idris didn't do the work that he needed to. He wasn't able to outpoke Scarf, and I think it wasn't very disappointing for Brain. They played well. They managed to not get snowballed early on by the Glaive, and then I thought that the CP Idris would be able to outscale Scarf. But in the end, it was just the gauntlets were used reasonably aggressively, but it just got burned down, got bursted before he could do considerable damage to Scarf.
Yeah, that's why. But honestly, it was just down to the lack of plays coming up from Bren Esports, right? I mean, they have got a very early game damage. Fortress went for that tension bow first, but I don't know. I mean, just looking at the game itself and looking at draft again, right? I'm just quickly looking through draft, and Fortress could have swapped up for better heroes out there. There was no need for a Fortress. Maybe an Ozo worked out that way. You have to put that, you know, Idris into the weapon carry, but if you want a CP carry, then probably, you know, I don't know.
There was Kestrel, there was Grumpjaw, there was Cruel, there were loads of weapon carries. Jewel Jungle would have worked really well, but I don't know why they went for the Weapon Fortress. If they'd gone P Fortress, that's understandable, but I think they picked Fortress and then later on decided, no, we should go CP Idris, you can go Weapon. I think there was a slight mistake in the draft, I agree. Yeah,
but probably that. But honestly, they've got so much better heroes to pick rather than this Fortress. And even when they actually picked this Fortress, they did not have the motivation to just launch any form of engage. They definitely have got the better early game. And seeing as how passive Elite 8 has been playing from the first minute till, say, the 15th minute, the side of Bren Esports could have easily utilize the time in between to just take full advantage. They definitely have got an early game with this Idris, but they just lacked that motivation to just push on after the first turret.
Yeah, they weren't that aggressive with, as you said, with tension Mo. Start the snowball, try and get your Idris ahead of the Scarf and item. But now we are going to head into the draft for the second game between Elite 8 and Bren Esports. I wounn't be surprised if a Celeste is banned straight away, same as the first game.
Yeah, I will not be surprised as well. Maybe Celeste is a threat, but honestly, with Bren Esports on the side of blue now, they have got advantage in terms of first ban. And I'm not surprised if they would decide to just remove that of Scarf from the Halcyon phone. Scarf put out a lot of damage in the previous game, a Hanjäger on the Scarf at least, and put out, I mean, Official Hein is a good player, but in that game itself, he did not put out a lot of, impact in terms of the early game gangs that Glaive can just put out. Instead, they were just trying to hyper farm, quote unquote, this particular Scarf Hanjäger was playing on. So they are going to remove that Catherine and still leaving Scarf open. Lance is taken out as well by the side of Elite 8.
Interesting for leaving Celeste Scarf all open as and they've decided to go for the Cath ban. Grace is almost certainly going to be picked here because Elite 8 didn't want to. I think it's just the most likely captain. So strong with even though Lyra is available, I'd much prefer to see that. And they're definitely taking their time. Bren Esports. They did first pick Idris last game. It didn't work out too well for them. So they could obviously go for Lyra. Yeah, they are going to do that. Bren Esports do, as you can see on the screen, prefer to pick Lyra over Grace, so that maybe makes sense for them.
Yep, I mean, Lyra over Grace, I personally think, and I favor the 40% damage reduction you actually get from Grace. And in the late game itself, you can just do so many outplays potential with that of Grace being picked up. And on top of that, your early game with Grace is just so much stronger as compared to Lyra. It's just your damage. Just buying one weapon blade, you can just dish out so much damage onto carries, even without a weapon blade as well. But of course, on the side of Elite 8 at this point in time, they have got a full roster of heroes they can rely on, and they will just go for the Scarf. There is no reason for them to not pick up the Scarf. It is tried and tested. They won with that Scarf, and the amount of damage Hanjäger was putting out because he was left unchecked for the entirety of the game was just insane. So Elite 8 at this point in time, they can remove that Glaive, which may be a threat in that early game.
Yeah, I was going to say, Celeste ban makes a lot more sense. Pick Scarf, you're not going to... And so you want to just get rid of that. And actually, Elite 8, Bren Esports have banned the Glaive away for... They don't have to worry about that Glaive CCing out your Scarf. Now, Elite 8 have many choices. They could go for the Grace. We could see an Arden again. I wouldn't be surprised if it's either of them because obviously Arden works well with Scarf, but they're going to second pick the Black Feather. They're clearly comfortable. Elite 8 are comfortable that they can get whatever captain they want because Lyra's already been picked. So unless we're going to see a jungle or lane Grace or jungle or lane Arden, that's actually quite a smart pick because Black Feather's really good against Scarf. So by Elite 8 picking it now, even though they've given away their comp, and we can see a Crystal Cloud Sky that's really good against Black Feather and against Scarf. So that's a really smart pick from Bren Esports. And to round this comp out, if they go something like Kestrel, that could work extremely well, or even an Idris as well. Sky Idris is a combo, but they're going to go for Cruel. That's risky with Petal still open, but then you'd have to go Roam Black Feather or something. So that's not the worst pick.
Yeah, I mean, Cruel, at this point in time, not the worst pick, like you say. The side of Elite 8 can't possibly settle for that Petal, unless, of course, they are going to run that Roam Black Feather. However, the side of Elite 8, they have got a lot of laners, or rather, they have got all the captains. It's open for them. I personally think Arden is a decent pick just to zone out that of Cruel and try to keep that of Sky within a perimeter. Yeah, there you go. They will settle for the Arden pickup. The next roam I possibly can see them picking up would be that of Batiste, but that hasn't been played quite very often in 2.8, at least as a captain.
Yeah, the problem with going alone Batiste in this a very squishy Scarf and Black Feather.
Yeah.
So going for Batiste would give nothing to Scarf, really, especially against someone like Sky. and it would just be you have three squishy heroes with that. But with an Arden, he's a bit tanky. He has Vanguard, and the Gauntlet works just as well as a Fear. So I think it's a good pick, and it provides much more for the Scarf specifically. Whereas someone like a Batista, even a Grace, has got a couple of ultimates, but it's risky if you're up against Crawl. They can stun you out of it. Vanguard much safer and is almost guaranteed to go onto Scarf when you need it.
Yep, definitely. So based on draft itself, you would think that Elite 8 has got this game, or would you think that Bren Esports would have a good chance in this coming matchup?
I think I do slightly favour Elite 8 because they've got the Scarf. It's obviously a very strong pick for them and for most people, but you cannot discount this Sky. We saw how strong Sky was earlier on, and if Bren Esports can continue with the Sky in that vein, then it's definitely going to be tough to beat.
Yep, but there is one thing that we must note. From the first game, just basing it off from the first game, Bren Esports played very, very passively. As for when you have a Cruel, you generally want to go up to lane, try to gank as much as possible. So I don't know how it will play out, but honestly, I must go with you. I personally think Elite 8's comp is just so much more balanced in terms of, say, a Bruiser and, of course, a Mage poking from the back, and I've got a very good frontliner in terms of the Arden. Whereas for the side of Bren Esports, you have got Lyra that can provide a large amount of heal in that early into mid-game, and you have a Sky that can just poke and be very, very mobile within your team itself, and you have a Crew that can just be up front and just be, say, hack it all and just deal out as much stacks as possible.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're going to be interesting to see if Bren Esports are going to go for the aggressive early game with the Crawl, because level 6 is going to be extremely strong. And yes, I requested you. I think we will be seeing a lane Sky, because I don't think we'll be seeing a lane Crawl. So I'm 95% sure that we're going to see a lane Sky. And I really hope that Bren Esports decide to be more aggressive than they were before. Try and go in aggressive. Try and go in against the Black Feather, who may be in jungle or in lane, and just try and start a snowball, because it wasn't that effective before. And even though I know they've got a Sky, they can farm up, but they need to be aggressive.
Definitely. Thank you for that analysis, Minimiter. So I request a duo. What do you think about another Sky for the night?
Well, as Minimiter said, I was talking for Castle Chat there about another lane Sky we're seeing come out in this situation, which we saw it work before, but this is the thing. I would like to agree with what you guys said earlier about Elite 8 just having a more balanced comp, and I really like the look of it. Also, Scarf being allowed onto that team once again. I'm surprised we didn't see a target ban there onto Scarf, because we have been seeing a fair few Mage target bans today with the Scarf and Celeste as well. So I'm surprised that Scarf was let to go through. Instead, they went for that Catherine ban first off, but we'll have to see whether Bren Esports are able to pull through with the team comp they've selected for themselves. And going back to that Sky, as much as I love Sky and would love to see Sky played well, it's also about what I said previously on how much is it about the plays on Sky and how much is it about the plays as the team overall and the synergy that's there that's going to affect the win or loss outcome.
Yep, very interesting move coming up from Elite 8 in that of the early game. What happened then was Anime saved me on this Arden, immediately rushed to lane, cleared the first wave, thus he's sitting on 5 CS at this point in time. So he cleared the first wave, forcing his wave to be much bigger as compared to the blue side or Bren Esports side. That way Sky would miss out a lot of CS. As compared to Hanjäger on this Scarf, Scarf has got 12 CS. So very good play coming out from Elite 8, or rather very unique play. We haven't quite seen it through the night today, and they are now just preparing for a light siege on the first turret of Bren Esports.
Yes, and Sensi 1, as pointed out by Mini, is running double boots. For whatever reason,
you can run faster.
I guess there's the passive speed, and yeah, with Cruel you really want to be onto the enemy, but would you not want the damage? I mean,
No.
You're relying so much more on either your stacks, and then more so on Mr. Jim on this Sky, which Sky, that's not maybe such a good idea here when Sky needs to really build up to be effective, at least have 2 items, I'd say.
It actually makes sense because according to Minimiter, yeah, so Minimiter is saying this, and because Cruel has got 2 feet.
No.
So with 2 feet, you need to pair a pair of boots. Like you cannot just go one, right? So it makes perfect sense as to why Singquan went for 2 boots because he needs it on his feet. But Singquan,
he has a wooden leg. He only needs 1 boot.
well, then you have got a point there.
SEMC, please. SEMC, please fix the graphic for boots and have 2 boots in the image, as this is ruining the lore and immersion in Vainglory, and we are currently having some problems in the esports scene as to what meta and what is not.
Okay, but anyways, Han Jaeger is a dragon, right? You see him buying boots as well for what? Those little fit. So, you know, it doesn't quite matter, right? So, I mean, all in all, back to the game itself, we are seeing yet again another rather passive, stagnated game altogether. But this time, however, a lot of lane pressure coming out from that of Elite 8 as a whole. We do see Han Jaeger and rather Official Hein just constantly coming into lane to try to siege and get the first turret. Mr. Jim, however, is as well and maybe looking for an aunt.
Okay, it looks like C1 has one of those boots as he realized, oh, well, I only... And it's going to go for the travel boots instead. Actually, my bad. Is that level 2 called the travel boots?
Travel,
But yeah, we're going to see him up in the top brush there, trying to hide out. Does get caught out, however, by Official Hein on that black feather. Able to realize there in the brush there, and Elite 8 just going to back out of that one. We might be seeing another fairly passive game between the 2 teams. I think, if anything, Bren Esports are going to be the aggressors here because they're that Cruel on that team. And once Guessing has that Arcane Passage, they'll probably be looking for some good engages. We might even see extended boomerangs of the From House Heart through the passage just to get the extra stun time because of the distance traveled.
Yep, I mean, it caps out at 3.3 seconds, but Singquan going on to Anime Save Me.
Yep, and there's going to be the Bright Bulwark to keep him out there. Death from above just for some zoning at this point. Mr. Jim going fairly low. You could see the Heartthrob stacks being built up on them. There's the target of Official Hein's choice, and I think makes enough sense right now. They really just want to get the Sky out of the picture because C1 is just going to build up stacks on them and get a lot of that back in lifesteal. So maybe you wait until you get the man advantage to turn the fight around onto C1, but C1 coming back up into this lane as the pressure is being put down by Elite 8, and we can see From House Heart is used onto Anime Save Me, perhaps not the correct target. Dragon's Breath in retaliation, and it looks like both teams once again just... It's not as if they're playing it so passive this match, but neither team can really find the secure of damage or the kill secure.
Well, yeah, I guess so, but had they just put in a little more commitment coming out from both teams at least, then they could have probably just scored a team fight, because, I mean, Singquan on that Cruel, or Cruel as hero in general, has to be played very, very aggressively just to get the early edge in game. However, we do see Han Jaeger just prefer to just build, you know, his items into that of the late game and just burn everyone down later on, rather than just going for the early game. But Guessing,
Elite 8, all 3 of them up in the lane. Guessing, and they're going to actually for it instead, but will they be able to get out of this one as C1 on the chase, and we can see Sky as well, but getting pushed back by Han Jaegers. Very good zoning there with this Scarf, and right now Elite 8 able to win out the first turret of the game, not trading over any kills for it as well, or at least any deaths from their side, so I'd call that one a positive outcome, especially 7 minutes in. It's really when you want to start looking for that first turret secure. However, do you think we'll see a return turret come out of Bren Esports, or do they not have quite the siege potential right now?
Honestly, if you were to ask me, I don't think Bren Esports at this point in time can actually just, take a turret down really quickly, because what they really excel in is ganks and team fights, in which they are not doing. And the side of Elite 8, I must say, a very intelligent choice of just putting a lot of pressure on the first turret of Bren Esports. Only reason being because Sky clears lane so very slow. So that is one thing, to note, because of how slow and
There's going to be the Goop and Spitfire onto the Bren Esports for Guest Sing and Sin C1, and followed through by Hanyega's going with the Dragon's Breath. They don't have the Broken Myth just yet to get the stack, so it's not going to be as important, but it is going to be valuable damage anyway, as they're able to pick up the first blood and possibly the second as they chase through onto Lyra. There's going to be Black Feather picking up that kill, and Sky, meanwhile, just not even a part of this fight, having to back off. And I think this is the problem, and I talked about before when I saw Sky being played earlier today. It was the fact that the whole team just synergized well, and the fact they were playing the aggressive style and they had that control over the team fights, that the Sky was just able to dance around and build up the damage items they needed to early, as well as find the damage onto the enemies they needed to early. But when they're in this situation where they're always having to run away from the enemy, it's quite hard as Sky to get that target lock on and to have that mobility as well.
So what you're saying is that Sky is not a hero you go to hard carry. It is just a hero that works super well with a lot of teamwork. But however, as Sky gets her items, then she'll clear a lane a little faster, as Bren Esports now trying to aim for a siege at this turn.
Well, that Crucible, so important right there. Got the triple block, I believe, from the Gauntlet, which could have been devastating otherwise. Anime say me more likely going to use that Void Battery to build towards an Echo, but right now doesn't have it yet, so it's going to have to wait that 80-second cooldown that's remaining on that Gauntlet. And this could be the chance for Bren Esports if they want to find it engage, because they've taken out that main source of, I guess, zoning as well as CC from the side of Elite 8. So it might be a bit easier to jump in there onto the backline, maybe try find the pickup onto Scarf, I believe would be the preferred target for the side of Bren Esports.
Yep, I mean, Official Hein has got the breaking point, has got the Serpent's Mask, he can survive for a very long time. Whereas Han Jaeger, in another case, is just going for, just maximum damage output with that Broken Myth, Frostburn, and Eve of Harvest. Has got a little sustain that, Eve of Harvest provides. But one thing that Bren Esports can really do is just get into the backlines, try to remove and burst Official Hein as quickly as possible, and then turn your attention onto Han Jaeger. Problem with the team comp of Bren Esports is that they do not have the burst quality versus Elite 8. So what happens is that even if Sync 1 with that tension bow under in his belt, in his pocket, can just dive in, try to get onto Han Jaeger. Han Jaeger can easily just build breaking point stacks, as Cool is building his own stacks, and then afterwards Mr. Jim just do not have that burst damage like Han Jaeger has. So that is an issue that Bren Esports will face going into every team fight. Bren Esports will excel in long, extended, drawn-out team fights because they need to build their damage. As Cruel, you need to build your smite and just make sure that your enemies do not put out as much damage. As for the side of Elite 8, they do not quite have that liberty. What they need to do is just go in hard on you and try their best to just burst you down.
Death from above is going to land onto Official Hein and Anime Save Me. Dangerous side of Elite 8, but there's no follow-through coming by with Bren Esports, and they're just going to allow Elite 8 to back out there. However, I would disagree slightly with some of what you said before. I think Elite 8, especially pushing into the late game, now that we see the Broken Myth and Breaking Point relatively onto the Scarf and the Black Feather for Elite 8, they're going to also have that kind of longevity in the team fights. They might not have the sustain in terms of health, but they have the ramp up in damage. And there's going to be the gauntlet going through by Anime Save Me. Elite 8 might be the ones to follow through on this. We see Bren Esports generally not following through with fights, but Elite 8, on the other hand, very much so looking for fights, as we see them jumping onto Mr. Jim. Official Hein trying to follow through, does get stunned up by the From House High, and they're able to secure the kill. You see Official Hein jumping a bit too deep under the enemy turret there, and it's just need to respect the damage that's still there coming by Bren Esports. It's the potential of damage. Just so far, they haven't exactly been able to put it to use because they haven't been following through with much CC or, I guess, possible kill chances.
Yeah, but honestly, although they want to ramp up in terms of damage, but overall their starting damage is just so much higher as compared to, say, Mr. Jim or Sync1. Sync1's majority of his damage will come from Spectral Smite. That you actually have to build up to 8 smite or 8 stacks before you deal a large burst of damage. As for Mr. Jim, he needs to have the lock on. Like you mentioned earlier on, if you're in the back feet or you're in the back foot, then it's going to be really, really difficult to find that perfect lock on, and instead you have to use your forward barrage as a zoning ability, as with your death from above as well. Whereas for Handjäger and Official Hein, their burst of damage is just instantaneous, and with that they build up more bursts of damage. So that is one thing that separates both of this team. But what happened then, and the only reason Bren Esports can take down that of Official Hein was because Official Hein dove in a little too deep, took a little too many turret shots, and thus Bren Esports came out on top. Even when coming out on top, Bren Esports are unable to push any form of objectives from there.
Okay, well, that is what I do. That was the part I did agree on with what you said earlier. Of the burst damage that Elite 8 is able to put out, that leads to even more ramped up damage. And it just goes to show in this situation with how the teams have been drafted that Elite 8 kind of chose the better hand in this situation. But it's about what Bren Esports are going to do with the hand that they chose for themselves. Are they able to turn this one around? Because, I mean, once again, in a very passive-ish game, when we look in terms of kills being secured and objectives being secured, I mean, we're only one turret over to the side of Elite 8, and there's going to be Anime Save Me going in with Gauntlet, trying to force Guessing to use a Crucible. I hope that is what the plan was. They do not have the Echo up. I mean, they did have the Echo, so Anime Save Me is going to have that Gauntlet once again. It just means in a team fight, they're going to have to make sure that one Gauntlet next time is going to be the Gauntlet that lands. So we'll have to see about that. For now, as I said before, Bren Esports, but really, it's how are they going to turn this one around? We're 15 minutes in, and in the previous match between Elite 8 and Bren Esports, they really didn't start moving until this Kraken was on the board. There was one fight, Kraken, and then things really got going for them. So is it going to be up to Bren Esports to turn this one around, as we see the death from above going down, as well as the Gauntlet not going to trap out anyone? What are your thoughts on this one as they just poke around a bit?
Honestly, if E8, like I say earlier on, or rather Bren Esports, if they can commit, right, and they can find the target, they definitely would have the upper hand. But Sync1 has to stop taking so much damage as well. Guessing, same thing applies to him, because I mean, they have got a sustain. They can go for the long sustain team fight. However, E8 will manage to take down the second turret from the side of Bren Esports, and at this point in time, it just looks rather deep for the side of Bren Esports. But overall, I personally think if Bren Esports can commit, they will have the upper hand because of how mobile Mr. Jim is on that sky. So he can Suri Strike around, try to dodge out all the Spitfires that's available or coming into him. And with the sustained Guessing X has on that Lyra and the Imperial Sigil, can definitely help Sync1 on that crew to sustain. But that is not happening at this point in time.
Yeah, and you see Mr. Jim actually, after using that full barrage, Goop is put down. It's a bit of a zoning thing because you can't go further towards into it, otherwise you risk taking a lot of damage yourself, especially with Sky not really having any CP defense there, only the reflex block, which I think is in emergency situations if you need to get out of, say, a Gauntlet or just negate some damage when Black Feather is jumping onto you. But Mr. Jim might be caught in a bad situation here. They use the death from above, but they're caught in the Gauntlet. They're able to actually find the kill onto Black Feather as Crew is going to pick that one up, and now it's going to be left up to Sky. Mr. Jim getting caught out of the Goop, going very low, and Guessing is going to be the target. I would just leave it up to Sky to get away from this situation, but Guessing doing a great job to also get themselves out of there, and Crystal Sentry trying to help out, but it's going to fall. And yeah, you could see both Cincy 1 and Official Hein have to be in that front line. And it really, once that happens, it's about who's going to get this carry, Jaegers or Mr. Jim. They really need to go down in these fights, because if you leave them standing, it's that team with the carry standing is more likely going to win it out. And I think when we looked at objectives so far, why Scarf was such a bad pick in the lane, one, Scarf just has such great siege potential, and I think that's what's holding back Bren Esports. And you said it before as to why Bren Esports can't push this turret so easily, because Sky just doesn't have such pressure in the lane that Scarf does. So they might not even be able to get here when we're 18 minutes in the game.
Yeah, but another fight may just break out with Elite 8, or rather Enemy Save Me taking a lot of fault barrage damage overall. But one thing's for sure, that Mr. Jim, or rather the gauntlet that comes down from Enemy Save Me, is definitely restricting the mobility of Mr. Jim. We saw a lot of times once the gauntlet is thrown down, what Mr. Jim does, it is just forward barrage instead of utilizing the full kit of Sky, and that is something that is very worrisome.
Oh, and we see Death from above being used. There's going to be the house defensive gauntlet. However, Echo is used, so they are going to have a second gauntlet up for themselves. But whether Elite 8 want to be the ones engaging into this fight, they might have to be the ones backing off. Instead, there's going to be the gauntlet. It might catch out since C1, but it doesn't. There's the fountain used on the side of Bren Esports, and Scarf on that back line, able to go in with the double kill, stacking up that broken myth up to 8, and they're going to follow through onto Sky, who's doing their best to escape from this one, but Official Hind is on the chase right now. Mr. Jim manages to trade out kill, doesn't go out empty-handed, still holding on to this Kraken, might even Surrey Strike to get around, but it's going to use the Death from above, and Jaeger's going very low. Mr. Jim, no. Oh, they walk into the Spitfire. They need to be so careful right now, using the Surrey Strike on the minions to go backwards. You can see that this is the mechanical play on Sky that I just appreciate so much, but there's only so far that a good Sky player can take themselves, and then it comes down to the rest of the teamwork and the synergy there as to whether you can actually win the game out as a whole. I'm not sure if you saw the other day when I posted about it. I went up against this guy who just played phenomenally, but I think it really depends on the overall team comp as to, team synergy as to whether you're going to win it out.
Yeah, but there is one thing that we must note as well. Mr. Jim on this guy, he's a little too afraid to just play with Surrey Strike. When I say play, it's because there are, like you mentioned, there are a lot of plays that you can make with Dead of Sky, and one of the big plays would be the repositioning of yourself with Surrey Strike. And if you're unable to do that, then it will pose a problem. It restricts yourself as a Sky player. On top of that, it restricts the hero as a whole as well. So if you can actually... Oh, Sync-1 though.
Yep, there's going to be the gauntlet, does get blocked out, however, but the follow-up gauntlet will not, since C1 game pushed back there. Lyra forced to use the Arcane Passage of Bright Bulwark to get out there. Is going to use the Imperial Sigil to speed boost the rest of the team out to safety. They're going to find... I was going to say that turret, but their second turret already gone right now. Bren Esports really just needs to win a team fight out here, get the Kraken, and they could turn this one around. They don't have a turret to their name just yet, but they have the potential to do so.
They definitely do have the potential, but a lot of these team fights are really back and forth, with Sync-1 not really providing much. And I must say, it was a lot of team fights is just on. But I'll just hold my thoughts. Yep,
and there's going to be the From House Heart onto the Scarf, onto Jaegers, who's getting burnt out, but he's going to and actually use the Spitfire into the goop and should be able to find Sin C1 with that Dragon's Breath. Looks like they'll be able to do so, but Mr. Jim so strong on this Sky right now. 9 stacks on that Broken Myth, and just the movement. I was going to say the mobility, the movement, it's just too much right now. Mr. Jim doing a great job to stay alive. However, the rest of Bren Esports have fallen, and they're not backing off from this fight. They need to be careful. They're low on energy. There's going to be the gauntlet. They may have been off more than they can chew. They're trying to position themselves in this fight. Look at this Mr. Jim, just a legend, a god. There's a turret shot, and there's going to be a smackdown coming through from the Arden. Kill going to go over to Black Feather, however, but it's going to be the ace for Elite 8. And Mr. Jim, I think, really going in it for the glory there. It was impressive to see. However, they weren't able to find, I think if they had a bit more energy, if they weren't caught out on the gauntlet. But this is what you talked about before, about how much the enemy team of Elite 8 restricts Sky's movement. And that's why I'd like to say Mr. Jim is doing a great job for how they're able to stay alive in these team fights, even if they're not able to find the kills in the very end. So however this match ends, both teams, GG well played in this match, however it goes.
All right, let's put this fairly then. Had Mr. Jim on the Sky played like so when he was trying to survive in team fights, then the entirety of Bren Esports would have probably stood a chance.
It's not over yet.
All right, true, makes sense. It's not all over yet. It is just down to Mr. Jim and whether or not he can play like so as when he was trying to survive.
It's down to Bren Esports as a team, and it's what I talked about before, as whether Bren Esports can pull through together as a whole. Double gauntlet going to be used there, and they're going to stun out Mr. Jim on the backline. There's going to be the Dragon's Breath. They find the kill that they need to. Cincy One's going to get pushed back. Kraken already pushing onto that turret, and I think Elite 8 realizing there that they really needed to shut that Sky down, and they do so. They're now looking for to just keep Scarf alive in this position and looking for the Kraken, because right now Kraken at half health is going to get this crystal. I think I stumbled on my words, but we get there in the end. It's going to be GG, well played, 24 minutes, 25 in, and that is it for the second match between the two teams. Again, 2 seconds off. I was 1 second off previously. I'm getting worse. It's getting later in the night. We'll put it at that.
Well, yeah, true. Definitely good game. Well played to both teams. And let's invite Minimizer back and see whether or not he agrees as to if Sky actually played like when he wanted glory, Bren Esports would have won.